Hello, good day to you. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We are reading in the book of Mark. We just read chapter 12, and we're now ready to read chapter 13. Remember that we are reading for context to understand the events and what is being said, to learn the lessons there and to apply those to ourselves. Alright. Like I said, we're in the book of Mark, and this is chapter 13, starting with verse 1. Now, Jesus had just been in the temple teaching, and they had just seen the offering from the widow who had, very little money, and she just put her little bit of money in, and now they're leaving the temple. So, chapter 13, verse 1, the book of Mark. And as he came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." And Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? There will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." Now, what he says, as far as I know, is correct. The the temple and all that was pretty much razed to the ground. I think they still have a wall that was part of some structure, but I'm not sure how much that really pertained to those buildings. I think it was more of a foundational type of wall. Anyway, verse 3, and as he sat on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when all these things are about to be accomplished?" And Jesus began to say to them, "See that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. These are but the beginning of the birth pains." I think we could look at that and say that maybe we're in that beginning. Depends on how you look at it, but if you look at the world wars and the way we see natural disasters today, and we know of them now, in the past, without all our telecommunications and stuff, we didn't necessarily know about all the things that happened around the world, like the earthquakes and different things. But now we know of that, and we know of the wars and the rumors of wars. We know all of that. But the end is not yet. Maybe we're further along, maybe not. I'm just throwing that out there as food for thought, really. So let's see. Let's move on down here. Okay. Now, and we should not be, to go back to verse 5 and 6, "Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray." Well, that has happened. We've had a lot of people who basically propped themselves up as a new prophet, as a new Messiah, and that is how they have presented themselves and what they have done. They have made themselves to be the new Messiah, the new leader of the church. And there's several of those, and I don't think I have to mention them, but I can tell you, it's not that hard to figure out. They saw angels, and angels gave them more information, and Jesus plainly warns of that. They warn of that here in the Bible. So that's definitely a concern and an issue, and we have to be aware of that. And then you have folks like the Jim Jones of the world and others who they lead others astray, and they actually get them killed, and that's a horrible thing as well. So we should be cautious about who we believe. It's okay to listen and figure out for yourself. If they're saying anything that doesn't go with the Bible, if they're trying to add to the Bible and add their own flavor and their own I guess if they're overwriting what's actually in the Bible and making themselves more important, then we know that's wrong. When Jesus comes back, it's going to be plain. It's going to be in the sky. It's going to be a plain sign that he is back. It's going to be obvious to everyone. Anyway, let me move on. Verse 9. But be on your guard, for they will deliver you over to councils, and you will be beaten in synagogues, and you will stand before governors and kings for my sake to bear witness before them. Now this is a prophecy that is true of their time, of what happened to a lot of the disciples, as well as, I think, our time and future times, where we also will go through persecution. And the gospel must first be proclaimed to all nations. And when they bring you to trial and deliver you over, do not be anxious beforehand what you are to say, but say whatever is given you in that hour, for it is not you who speak, but the Holy Spirit. And brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And we see the beginnings of this. People right now, I don't know how it is in your family or in everyone's family, but I can see it in some families where if you're a Christian, other family members, while some will agree with you and they're Christians, but there are some who are not Christians and who are offended basically in your belief and in that you believe in God and you believe in Jesus and you try to follow the gospel. They are offended by that, and the reason being that they don't believe themselves, and I think somehow they see it as a threat to them. I almost had the words for it, but I don't have it right now. But they do see others believing in the Bible and in the gospel as a threat to them, like that might make it real and true, and they might actually be in the wrong and have to face judgment. Depending on how you look at it, I think that's part of the problem, is internally they're not as secure as they want you to think they are. For instance, if you don't believe in anything, if you're an atheist, then why do you care what others believe? You should not care at all. It should not matter to you. But to a lot it does, because they see it as a threat to themselves. That if you believe that's a threat to them, maybe they should believe and turn to God, but they don't want to. So anyway, that goes to their insecurity and their own unbelief. So alright. So verse 14. Oh, hold on just a second. Pardon me, I had to have a little water. But when you see, this is verse 14. Oh, I better move our screen. See, I'm all over the place. But that's because I get to rambling. Anyway, verse 14. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not to be, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down, nor enter his house to take anything out. And let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that it might not happen in winter, for in those days there will be such tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation that God created until now, and never will be. And if the Lord had not cut short the days, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, whom he chose, he shortened the days. And then if anyone says to you, Look, here is the Christ, or Look, there he is, do not believe it. False Christs and false prophets will arise and perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect. But be on guard, I have told you all things beforehand. And Jesus is letting us know that there's not going to be, that's not how he's going to come back. He's not going to come back like that and be doing signs and wonders like that there will be false prophets, and maybe these are fake signs, maybe these are real signs. I don't know. I would be tempted to think that they're fake signs. But if Jesus really came back, I mean, imagine how he traveled around back then, and he healed people everywhere. When Jesus comes back, everyone's gonna rise again. We're all gonna be taken care of. There's not going to be any sickness. There's not going to be any of that, because we're going to go to heaven. Well, we're going to go to heaven or hell, but we're going to go to heaven, and there's not going to be any of that. So there's not going to be any need for them to do signs and wonders. That's going to be at the end, and we'll get there and we'll read about that, but that's all going to all of this is going to pass away. So there's not going to be any of this. Like, I think people get confused about this. For instance, when you talk about the abomination of desolation standing where it ought not to be, that is a little bit, that's something that's mentioned in Daniel too, and I've often had different thoughts about it. And it could be simply that the temple was razed, and that now there's a mosque there. It could be that there will be some further destructive event there. I don't know. Or, maybe they're talking about in the past when the temple was razed. And some prophecies have the dualness to them, so that it could have been talking about where Israel as a nation was basically destroyed, and the temple was destroyed. Or it could be and it could also be talking about what's to come in the future, where there will be some other abomination of desolation, which I could only, figuring out the understanding of the abomination of desolation, I could only equate it in my human knowledge to something like, some sort of nuclear or atomic explosion, devastation. But that doesn't mean that's correct. That's just the only thing in my human mind I could think of that made sense. There could easily be something else, some other thing that I'm just not aware of, especially as this would be in the future for us. So, for in those days there will be such tribulation as not been from the beginning of creation that God created until now, and never will be. Now, I do believe that's prophetic in the future. I believe more than likely Christians will be more and more heavily persecuted over time, even as more so than they were back then, which they were pretty persecuted back then, if you remember the Romans. And it says that God cut short the days so that the elect could be saved, because we're just human. We're not as good as Jesus, and we're not God. We might not be able to withstand something forever and ever. Eventually we would probably break. But then during those times there will be false prophets and false Christs, and we just have to be aware that that's something it's going to happen. They're going to be there, and we want to avoid those and realize that they're not true, and we don't want to fall prey to anybody like that. Alright. Verse 24, But in those days after the tribulation the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be fallen from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. And that's what I was referring to. Jesus is going to be coming in the clouds in the sky with great power and glory. And there's going to be these other issues where the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. This is not going to be, this is going to be an obvious thing. It's not going to be anything that you're going to have any doubts about it. So when people say, the end of time is here or there, well, until you see Jesus popping up, coming in glory, it's not over. The fat lady has not sung, so to speak. It's like that's going to be the end. The end of this, not the end of us. We're going to continue, but the end of this and what we've had here. Verse 28, from the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branches become tender and put out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. And this is something that has a little bit of duality to it, because he is letting the disciples know that they're going to go through, tribulation and go through these troubles as well. And that, this generation, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. That's because all those things were going to take place. After Jesus died and rose again, the disciples, they did see him come back in glory, not exactly like we see here, but, or at least not to my knowledge. They did see him ascend to heaven, though. So, but this has, like I said, a little bit of duality to it, where those folks who were there, his disciples, they did not pass away until they had gone through they had gone through their own tribulation, and these things had happened, because that was part of what was coming through Rome. I think ended up the Romans destroyed the temple, and there was a lot of badness that went on, and then Christians were persecuted in Rome for a long time. So verse 32, but concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, keep awake, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants... There we go. And let's see. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his servants in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to stay awake. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or when the cock crows, or in the morning, lest he come suddenly and find you asleep. And what I say to you, I say to all, stay awake. So Jesus is telling us to stay awake, to stay alive, to stay awake in the Word and the knowledge of God, and to realize that He's coming back, and that we should be doing what we know to do, be servants for God and servants for others, and help one another until He returns. And you can also look at this in a little bit of a duality again, that we don't know when we're going to die. We don't know when we're going to pass away and move on from this earth. So again, we need to stay awake in the Word, stay awake in being a Christian, and keeping ourselves ready at all times, because we don't know when we might die or when we will pass. Sometimes people know that they're sick and dying, but sometimes we don't. Sometimes something happens and it takes us suddenly. So we need to always be ready. That's why I say there's kind of a duality to some of this, and this is one of those things where he's talking about a prophecy out in the future, but also you can take this and apply that to our normal everyday lives. We don't know when we're going to pass away, and we should always be ready, so that if we pass away, that we are ready to meet God and Jesus, and ready to be judged, and just say, Lord, we trust in you, we have trusted in you, and we need to make sure that we stay forgiven, because we're going to make mistakes, we're going to sin, and that doesn't make it okay knowing that we're that we do it, but still we need to continue to strive not to do that. Like Paul said, keep striving for the crown, keep moving forward and working on ourselves, and trying to be better servants of God and Jesus. So that is the end of chapter 13. When next we come back, we will read Mark chapter 14. I want to thank you for listening. Please comment and subscribe, and bring up any points or any concerns. Ask any questions in the comments that you might think of, and we will try to answer you truly from the Bible. Okay, we'll try to research those things out. All right, so thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful day, and God bless you.